We saw 92% of customers are asked to re-enter all their info when they go into the store. There's a trust gap between the customer and the dealer that is still very, very real. If you're filling out the Foursquare and right underneath it, I can show you exactly where the customer's range is mentally. That's pretty powerful stuff. The supply's back, so the competition's back, and they're going to have to drop that price to stay competitive.
A big thank you to our sponsors for making today's episode possible. Upstart, Car Dealership Guy Industry Job Board, and Cox Automotive. And now let's get into the show.
Chase Abbott on the CDG podcast. Chase, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Good to have you on the pod finally. I'm curious. You were telling me right before this that you're a listener of the pod. What's your favorite episode? Gotta ask.
The one I listened to, I thought the one was cool. The one I listened to the other night was the gentleman that was selling all of his cyber trucks on TikTok. I thought that was interesting, right? And so I thought that was a really cool story. So I did listen to a few last night, kind of bounced around, but really good content and just a testament to you. I mean, you've blown this brand up. I started hearing about you a few months ago and was excited to get this opportunity in front of me. And you have a really great following. So testament to you,
appreciate you, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're trying hard. Yeah, it's been fun just bringing the kind of refreshing content to the industry. So that's our goal. So if anyone listening to this thinks they can be part of that goal, hit me up. We're always looking for different types of stories. You mentioned the TikTok dealer. So George Saliba, phenomenal episode, phenomenal story. And I think, again, very different. Like, it's a great learning opportunity for just lots of dealerships, right? Just if anyone hasn't listened to that episode, George just really records his day-to-day and documents his just life at the dealership. And it's pretty unique because you'd think like someone would have done this already, right? Like you see all these shows on TV, like Pawn Stars, and like it's like almost like so obvious. It's like, wait, how has someone not done this? But he's done it very well, and it's really caught on. So I'm glad you liked that one.
I did. I think it's what interests me the most, just the level of progressiveness with some of these dealers, thinking outside of the box or looking at it with a fresh set of eyes, kind of like you just mentioned. And why can't we replicate something that works so well over here for auto? And just, it's right there in front of our faces sometimes, and we don't see it. So testament to that gentleman. That was a really, really cool deal. And obviously he's moving iron. So,
well, tell me about your past. You started at the dealership, right?
Yeah. I actually started the dealership when I was in high school. My brother sold cars there, and I used to do dealer trade drives when I was 16. Like, as soon as I got my license, I was in a dealership. And we had that group had 7 stores, and so they needed kids to move cars around for them, and I used to do that. So I was at the dealership at a very, very young age, and I remember being at the tower, and I was 17. And guys are just hammering me with jokes and cracks. And this is 2000, or 1996, right? Anyway, I could hold my own in the comebacks, right? On the wit side of the conversation, they always say, you should sell cars one day. You're better than your brother. And so years later, when I was in college, I went back to that store. The gentleman that was running that store was still working there. And that's kind of where I started my career in automotive while I was going to school. Started selling cars. So 2003.
And how did you get into that? Was there any family connection, or was it just
just that my brother had worked at that store, and I had made a couple inroad relationships with some of the managers at that store, and they actually were still there years later, which is kind of shocking to hear based off the turnover rate right now in automotive. But went in there and asked for a job through that channel, and I remember I sold 38 cars my first 2 months, and they said to me, "Hey, big guy, you can type. Why don't you be our internet manager?" And I think that was the only prerequisite to be an internet manager in 2003. She needed to be able to type. And so we took an internet department doing 5 a month. 6 months later, we were doing 65 a month. And so kind of pioneered internet a little bit, if you will, back in the day with that group, and ended up running internet director for all the stores, and then worked my way through the chairs and got a great education. New car manager, used car manager, F&I producer, F&I director, and then GSM. Was running a P&L when I was 24, and just loved the car business, loved everything about it, minus the hours. That's kind of what I did. I stayed at one store, kind of learned the deal, and got my education on retail car sales.
Which brings me to my next question. Why did you leave the retail business and decide to go to the vendor side?
I would tell you what, just a blunt and honest truth. One of the big ones was the hours. I was a young manager. I was working 60, 70 hours a week. I had no family, I had no kids. That was available for me to do. However, and I was making pretty good money, I will tell you. But when you start dividing that by how many hours you worked, it's not so great. And so that was part of my driver was like, hey, I want to get this education. I didn't want to be a bouncy car guy. We had a lot of those people that had worked at 4 dealerships in a year. I did not want to do that. And then I thought there was a better way. I felt like there were different ways to approach, making somebody work 70 hours a week. It was just such a difference from any of the other brands or businesses that I ever worked in. And honestly, like I didn't see how it scaled for me to have kids, which I wanted, for me to have a wife, which I wanted. I didn't see it working. And so, honestly, man, I left the dealership, didn't tell a soul, took my time, saved up some money, planned the exit and rolled out. It had nothing on the horizon, which is not like me. But then about a couple of months later, I saw an ad and actually it was in Career Builder for VIN stickers, which was the precursor to VIN Solutions. And I didn't know anybody there either. I just went in and applied, had a good interview, got the job. They were going to take their inventory solution and kind of turn it into this CRM website, lead management, this whole kind of dealership in a box. And I was excited by that prospect because I had used multiple tools in the dealership, none of which talked, especially back then. And I thought, ooh, this is a better way. And so I got involved in that. I was one of the first sales guys at VIN and was one of their top sales guys for a long time and then ended up being a director there and doing all that stuff before we got purchased by Cox in 2011.
What was that like for you?
The Cox thing, at first, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And obviously, though, coming out of the startup, it had its problems, too. I would tell you the biggest feel difference was with the prior regime versus Cox was, building to exit versus building to sustain, I would say. Much different feel. Obviously, those folks were wanting to try to sell that company, which they did and did a great job doing that. But short game versus long game, I think. But there was lots of changes. But I think the biggest thing was just more fairness was introduced. And the real opportunity with Cox that I saw was that they just owned so many brands and things, all in automotive. And so, you work with one company, you have one org chart to kind of climb or company ladder, if you will. At Cox, there's multiple because we have all of these coming. We have the mobility division, we have the auctions divisions, we have the software division, we have Auto Trader, Kelley Blue Book, and all the consumer stuff. So there's a lot to do here. Stay in automotive, but still really grow your career. So it's been great. They've been a fantastic company.
For everyone listening, right? So Chase got on this podcast and I said, Chase, I'm really curious. You are overseeing all these products at Cox Automotive, right? Multi-billion-dollar enterprise. And one of the big questions that lots of dealers have been talking about since the CDK outages is what's going to happen with, dealership bundles or like the integrated products, right? Will that remain the trend? Will dealers and vendors continue pushing integrated ecosystems that are, faster, easier to use, offer a better customer and dealership experience? Or will the pendulum swing back, right? Will we go to this let's use a bunch of different boutique software and maybe try to connect them in different ways, but essentially the way we've done it. So just to repeat the question I asked you earlier, but it was off the record, it was, how are you handling that today in store? Is that a question that's kind of coming up a lot for you with dealers?
Yeah, it is. The whole, I'm going to, not put my nuts in one basket. I'm going to put them in multiple baskets is definitely a conversation that we're having. One of the things I feel pretty strongly about, though, is if you do the boutique path, you can make it work. It's just the frustration day to day that you might experience by re-entering information, duplicative data, reloads, really just clawing at the time of a car deal, and time kills car deals in my experience. And so, I think that's the one strategy. The other strategy is the ecosystem piece where you're going to have a lot better success, I would think, of having those, that data move around those systems and have it integrated. And then the one key takeaway for me was really, look, you can go boutique it all you want. You can find great products. I just highly doubt that they're going to be spending as much on cybersecurity as a ecosystem would be, because you got to think about the dollars and the resources available to that company. I used to be a startup. I can tell you right now, when we were a startup, the biggest problem we had was cash flow. And so we had much bigger setup fees when we were a small company at Vin than we were more worried about the monthly MRR. Right now, I tell you, it's a complete opposite. We do a lot of zero setup fees, but we obviously focus on the MRR because you're going to pay that every single month. And so I think, to me, the ecosystem is still the play. I just think the dollars that are thrown at that, you're going to be in a much better spot to protect your data, protect your customer, and then also not have to worry about, as much about the API stuff and moving the data around and creating just daily fires for your employees. And I say that to the core. Time kills car deals. And we already have a problem with car deals taking too long. And so this is obviously a contentious point, but I think it's something that we really have to focus on to increase the customer experience in this industry.
I mean, I see your point, right? Like, obviously cybersecurity, right? You have bigger budgets. I think the question is, right, how and where are dealers going to hedge more in light of, what lots of dealers just experienced, right? I mentioned on prior pods that I actually know some dealers that have multiple DMSs. Now, they're big dealers, right? DMS systems. So they're very, big dealers, over 10 rooftops and whatnot, in some cases over 15 or 20 even. But that's not like the common thing. It's obviously a lot costlier. It's more overhead to manage. That's probably even the bigger headache. When it comes to the big systems, do you think that something like that would catch on in this environment? Or again, you represent, dealer track DMS, and are you gung-ho that, hey, it's an isolated incident and it won't meaningfully change the purchasing behavior in our industry?
I don't think it will. I mean, obviously in pockets it might. I think running one DMS is a lot.
It's hard enough.
Running two, I would not want to be in that practice as a former dealership operator. But I get it. I get the why, right? Some people get a server-based DMS and I have to worry about their internet. There's reasons for everybody that has that, that issue. But fundamentally, no. I don't think it'll change, like, at the macro, the buying level that we see, or what they're actually focused on. I do think there will be a grain of salt, though, now, and we'll have to answer a lot more, obviously, cybersecurity questions. And look, here's the other thing, too, like, just, zoom out, throwing my Cox badge to the side. The other thing you got to keep in mind is, the bigger companies, they're going to be higher, probability of target by some of these folks, right? So you got to keep that in mind as well, right? Just being a steward to the industry, right? I mean, who's going to target a garage band with zero revenue? They're not going to pay the ransom. They don't have any money to pay you. And so you've got to think about that as well. However, I think, like I said before, I think this is somewhat of an anomaly. I hope it's an anomaly, that we don't have a systemic thing here with this type of cybersecurity issues that we have. We just haven't had that in the past. And in that world, for sure, one of everything, and then APIs between them would be the play that I would run today, just because we have to take some of the time out of these car deals, because it's still killing some of the survey stuff that I'm seeing from consumers today with the experiences.
How involved and just like how technical are the conversations you're having with dealers today, right? Like versus like 5 years ago, even.
Very, especially in the light of what's happened, we're seeing a lot of, security questions. What is Cox doing to protect the data, which we have given, we spend an absorbent amount on that, and we have conveyed back with our dealers how we handle that. And then look, it's great to see the industry rise up in the CDK event and do some things to kind of help these dealers. We did as well with a lot of dealers that we built shell accounts for and things like that to be able to keep their business afloat. So, like I said, I think it's kind of an anomaly, and I hope it is, but I think that regardless, we have a big gap in customer experience. We saw 92% of customers are asked to re-enter all their info when they go into the store. There's a trust gap between the customer and the dealer that is still very, very real. I mean, I get that obviously this is an impactful deal with what happened with the cybersecurity event, but you can't just also put all your nuts in that basket as well. I think you've got to really diversify and claw back at the customer experience, because it doesn't matter, what kind of cybersecurity you have with your DMS and you quit selling cars because everybody else is out experiencing you.
This episode is brought to you by my very own car dealership guy industry job board. CDG Jobs is revolutionizing how talent connects with top automotive companies. Here's a shocker. We're not using any fancy technology or AI. We literally built a simple HTML job board. That's it. But it works really, really well. And the best part, it's completely free for CDG listeners to post and fill positions at their firm. So I'm sure you're wondering, what sets us apart? Well, when companies hire through CDG Jobs, they're choosing from a pool of the most informed candidates in the industry. Don't wait. Whether you're hiring or seeking a new opportunity, visit cdgjobs.com today or click the link in the show notes below. That's cdgjobs.com. You know, I tweeted like a year ago that diversification is just growing as a theme in the world, but also in automotive in a big way. And the reason I tweeted that at the time was because I saw that dealers are suddenly looking into like power sport dealerships. They're looking at, new F&I products, right? Like all these, like, I interviewed one dealer that is, investing record amounts in their body shops, collision centers, like dealers, the industry, right? Having witnessed what we've experienced over the last 4 years, everyone is sort of like, okay, the future and present is just so unpredictable, right? Like add the CDK outages on top. And everyone is just focused on in not just on technology, but under operations, right? How can I diversify my business more, right? And if I'm a franchise dealer, I'm looking to grow. I'm looking to acquire other types of brands, right? Maybe I had all my eggs in the Stellantis basket, and now I'm, in deep doo-doo. And look, this too shall pass, right? Like things, it's cyclical. But the point is, like, I think that's the kind of overarching theme, right? I'm seeing independent dealers suddenly saying, hey, I want to look into buying a franchise. So everyone is sort of has their diversification hat on, which I think is a healthy thing for the industry. But it's very real. And I just don't remember seeing that prior to the last couple of years. Like you saw independent dealers that just did the independent thing for 20 years and suddenly they're, looking for a franchise. It's like things have changed. I think it's for the better, though.
You too. Yeah. And I was just going to add on to that real quick. You've seen, we've done that internally with Cox Auto and standing up the mobility division years ago, and placing some bets there on things like rideshare and heavy fleet services and, mobile fleets and things like that are going to need servicing. They're going to need, different things. Like we have a guy that does tree trimming after natural disasters all across the globe. Him trying to get service on 18 trucks in 18 different states is like next to impossible. And so, there's a lot of things that we're doing on the mobility side as well. So there's a lot of diversification going on even internally where I'm at as well. So I think you're dead on. That's a trend we've definitely seen, especially the last 5 years or so.
I want to ask you about, so you mentioned this term API, which I have to imagine some people listening are not familiar with. And so what did I do as you were speaking? I pulled up ChatGPT and I said, give me a simple analogy or definition for what an API means, right? ChatGPT spits out, API is essentially a list of it lists a set of operations that developers can use in the technology. And then it says, basically what it says is like, think of this like a menu in a restaurant, right? You're a developer, you have a menu that provides a list of dishes that you can order alongside a description of each dish. So I thought that was a pretty neat analogy because, again, I was looking for a really simple way. And you mentioned the term API. I'm curious to know, given you are such a big ecosystem in the industry, practically every dealer listening to this is using at least one, if not multiple, Cox Automotive products that you likely oversee. When you say API, how do you connect with other tools in the industry? Like, how do you make this work for the dealers if it's not a Cox product? When you say API, like, give us a little overview into that world and how you kind of handle that day to day with dealers.
Yeah, sure. So, some dealers may not come fully into the ecosystem. So they're going to have APIs, that they're going to need. And they might have a homegrown solution, that they want to integrate in with their current Cox stack. That could be a startup, GarageBand type of deal that does not have APIs yet. Therefore, the only integration you can really stand up is what we call a hostile integration, which is a screen scrape of the existing tool and bringing it over into based off of that. And then you have all these different levels of certification. So some with the DMSs, you've got RCI, you've got 3PA with Reynolds, with CDK. And so you've got kind of these set ways that you can integrate, meaning what do you need? Do you need vehicle info? Yes, I need the VIN, I need the model number, I need, the stock, I need all these things to flow over. And so what that does, I always kind of use the analogy of like a loading dock. Like if you have an API, you can back your truck up to our loading dock and we will load everything that you get through your API, which is a negotiation on what that is. I will say, we are very Switzerland at Cox with who we API with. We want to API with just about everybody because we find that if we don't, it causes problems, right? If they want to stay on VIN solutions, but they need to integrate with this company and we tell them no, there's a strong chance they might leave VIN.
Got it. And why do you say that? Like from a cost perspective, an experience perspective, what makes a better experience?
Cost, experience, time, integration, day-to-day brain damage that these folks are experiencing by, like I said, like the re-entering the info, I say that people don't really understand the multitude that can have, the effect that can have, especially on a high volume store. When you're doing it every single day, seller experience drops. They're pissed because they have to enter this stuff in again. And then the customer experience drops because of that. And it's just kind of a domino snowball effect a little bit. I would say, that it's painful day to day when you don't have the APIs to help you.
Okay, so tell me what else dealers are talking about on the street level. Like, are dealers asking you about AI? Is that like a real active conversation or is that kind of like a social media thing?
Oh, no, it's a real conversation. The difference, I guess what I would say about AI today, there's just so many flavors of it out there, man. It is hard to, like everything gets like, it's like the buzzword. So I think a lot of people get locked into it. But I mean, if you really think about it, there's all these different types of AI. You've got virtual assistants and like chat bots that are going to take over conversations and use AI to go back. You've got generative AI, which salespeople are using to generate email responses to make them sound better. We've got machine learning. We have predictive insights with things like buying signals that we have at Cox Auto, which is based on all the first party data we have. So there is just a ton of different flavors of it. I think that sometimes it just gets called all AI. I would consider it more of a category than an actual one product. But we have seen tremendous success with our AI type products that use that customer behavior. I'm a big relevancy guy when it comes to customer experience through the digital path, so you can scale it. The problem is it's really hard to scale if you don't have the data. And that's something I love selling Cox Auto was. We have 82 million unique visitors a month. And that's what, that's our sizzle. We comb that first party data from Auto Trader, from Kelley Blue Book, and from dealer.com. And we take those insights and all the breadcrumb trails that those customers are leaving behind and then resurface them back up into the deal scenario to help dealers make decisions or do something differently than they would have otherwise with that customer, with that next run or that next turn because of the first party data.
This episode is brought to you by Upstart. Upstart partners with dealers to digitize and connect their online, in-store, and financing process to create the car buying experience today's customers expect. Backed by trusted OEMs, Upstart helps dealers sell more cars efficiently, speeding up processes to boost profits and enhance customer satisfaction. With integrated finance capabilities powered by AI technology, Upstart's connected platform enables consumers to shop from anywhere, then seamlessly transition in store and complete the deal digitally, creating a hassle-free purchase path that benefits both dealers and buyers. For a brighter car buying future, visit upstart.com/dealers. That's upstart.com/dealers or click the link in the show notes below.
How are you integrating, right? Like, or I would say ask differently, like where are you seeing dealers most interested in automating things or leveraging, new technologies within their systems? Or are they just generally just curious about it? Like how actionable is this today within your products and systems, right? Is there a specific piece of technology tool or system that, dealers are, really excited about and leveraging more than, they have historically? Anything specific there?
Yeah, I would tell you a couple of things. Like one is our predictive insights with our buying signals at Cox. So one thing we work on a lot is how many active customers in your database of customers are actively shopping online and that we know about, because we tag those folks and we can tell if you're back on the website looking or kind of what's going on with that consumer, and then kind of reverse engineer, the lead conversion or the car deal or the payments or the financial, whatever it is, to try to give them insights into, what's going on with that consumer. And I think the difference is at scale. Like there's a lot of companies that can go give you AI insights into a consumer. My question back to them would be, do they own the data? How timely is the data? The first party thing and what you saw with privacy tracking with Google is going to really change the game on third party cookies. It's already started to. In January, they started, I think, with 1% of the database, which is, millions of people.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? Can you clarify that?
Google calls it privacy tracking. Google Chrome is by far the most used web browser out there. And basically, it's kind of the stock prices are plummeting a bit on third-party cookies, just because, folks could buy that data, third-party, and then inject it into a tool and then make, insights or conclusions about what's going on with the buyer out there. And some of those were, great. They work. They're fine. However, there are some that aren't timely. That, that data may be 2 months old and you call back to sell them a car and they're like, hey, I bought one last week. What are you talking about? And so I think that there's definitely some questionable, data that you can come through, but we are seeing at a grand scale, dealers wanting to use that. I think the difference is to answer your first question, if it's not automated, it's tough. If it's not automated, it's tough with a dealership because you've got to make sure that thing's on autopilot, surfacing up areas where they need to get involved. But we have seen some really tremendous things with AI and knowing where to switch cars, where to, take the payment. What do we do with cash down? Do we go stretch this customer again? It's some really cool things that we're doing with that first party data. So,
and within what systems are you doing that?
So we have a new system that came out last year. It's called Deal Pulse, which is part of a new UI UX we're working on called Deal Central. And so we asked the dealers, like, look, we've done AI for a while. Like I can tell you right now with about 85% certainty what make they're going to buy. I can tell you with about 60% certainty what model they're going to buy.
Because you have the information from Auto Trader and all these other sites.
All these other sites and how many things that they've looked at. Now, Deal Pulse is a little different. Deal Pulse was kind of my, baby, if you will, because I'm an old desk manager. So we asked the dealers, what do you want to know about your consumer? If they were to leave you a trail of breadcrumbs, which ones of those breadcrumbs would you pick up? What would they have to do with? Shocker, all the top 4 answers were...
Wait.
You want to say them?
Well, you said that first one was payment, what payment can afford. I was actually going to lead with down payment.
That's it. One of the 4. It's the Foursquare. It is literally the Foursquare.
Right.
It is payment, trade, APR, and cash down. And so I was reading the survey results that we got back out of Cox survey. I was like, oh my God, this is so like classic dealer. But
wait, but that's actually kind of cool, right? Because it's just like human nature. Like don't complicate it. Like that's exactly what people want. It's worked for decades. Now you can digitize it, which is great. But like it's still the same. It's still the same information at the end of the day, That's right. And it's let's just say it's very transactional based, right? And so,
how am I going to put a car deal together? Yes or no? And so what we've done with Deal Pulse is really cool stuff. So, the customer submits a lead, right? And they put in everything that they want you to see to the penny, to the dollar, down APR. This is what I submitted, blah, blah, blah. However, these customers are clicking thousands of URLs. They're figuring payments. They're in digital retailing tools like we have with Accelerate at Cox, figuring out payments, changing cash down, changing trade-in amounts. All of this stuff in their own confidence while they're in the tool, right? They're not interacting with anybody but the tool. And so we take those insights, we distill them down, and we put them in aggregate form. So when a customer comes in Deal Central, we actually have the Foursquare there showing what the customer submitted. And then right underneath that, we have what the actual range was of that customer's shopping behavior, which is really cool stuff. So I can see 450 was the payment, but I can also tell you that they looked at payments all the way down to 380, all the way up to 520. Right. I can also tell you that they've said 0 down to me 3 turns I've taken on this customer. They have no money down. Well, then why did they figure payments with $500 down 37 times?
Are these tools integrated into like all your products, certain products, right? If I'm listening to this, I'm like, okay, I want to try that, or I want access to that information for a fresh customer that's, coming up into my dealership. Like how do I get access to this?
So Deal Central lives across a few different products. It's Vin Solutions CRM. It's Accelerate, like I mentioned, the digital retailing tool. And then we also have some integrations with the mandates, I guess you would say, to use the full stack with our F&I products with digital contracting and then compliance. So around the F&I stuff to make sure you obviously don't go to jail. But those are the pieces that kind of move. As a former F&I producer, I didn't know that was a real thing until I got an F&I, but turns out it is. And so, so it moves the customer kind of through the buying process from first click all the way to sold and delivered, and think of it more of a digital process, bringing all these things in. And really what we're trying to do is make a desk manager or GM, whoever's working the deal, do something different than they would have otherwise based off the data. And I need to get that to you in an instant. You're not going to go look for it. I know, I sit on that desk. But if you're filling out the Foursquare and right underneath it, I can show you exactly where the customer's range is mentally. That's pretty powerful stuff. I can back into that and make a deal happen.
You see yourself spending another decade with Cox Automotive?
Yes.
Damn. Straight to the point. No fluff.
Yeah, they've been a fantastic company, man. I cannot.
Yeah.
Look, I can't. Let me say this. That was a real low bar, buddy. And Cox, I don't know that I could get above that bar anywhere else. And I mean that. They've been fantastic. And look, they're a different kind of company. No companies, in my experience, there's less than 3%, to give you a stat. Less than 3% make it to fourth generation. The first one builds it. The second one maintains it. The third generation sells it.
It's like that, that inheritance stat that I mentioned on previous podcasts, right? Which is like most families lose all the wealth. It's a little bit of different from this context, but most families lose all the wealth by like the third or fourth generation.
Yes. Yeah. Less than 3% make it to actual fourth. So 97% of folks are out. And Cox is in its fourth generation. And look, they've got the money thing figured out. They're a privately held company. Which is rare, I think, to be this size and be private. And they want you to be a good human. They want you to go do charity work, and they mean it to the core. And they want you to go be a better citizen. They want you to improve civilization, those types of things. They want you to do right at work and do all that stuff too. And they make very smart bets. However, money isn't everything. It is a big chunk, but there's also all this other stuff around being a good human, being nice to one another, working together on a common goal. And it was just so foreign to me, man.
Yeah, I was going to say, dude, you're like a dealer working bell to bell. You come into an environment where, I don't know what it's like in the office, but, to give you like a physical, like real world analogy, you got kombucha from the, instead of tap water.
That's right.
In the kitchen, right? So it's like
on tap, dude, right there.
I can imagine it's a little culture shock.
Yeah. And the same reason I didn't want to leave the car business, I didn't want to be one of those bouncy car guys. That was always the dealership's problem and not mine.
Well, you're not bouncy. I'll give you credit on that. Or that's why I asked you that decade question, because you've been pretty consistent.
Yeah, no, I and they take care of me, and man, I lay it on the line for them. I work my tail off to try to get the message out there. And I think, I've had an advantage being at Cox because I sat in all the chairs on the retail side of the conversation. So some executives, if I said to them, hey, a sled just pulled up outside, they might think Santa has arrived. I would just tell you that it's a wholesale piece because they don't necessarily know the language of the retail car business. And I think that's really helped me in my career, being able to sit in all the chairs and then kind of pitch that back against whatever product we might be making or working on and say, hey, when I was sitting in the chair, this is how we did it. That might help some insights and get that product a little bit, better to come out first run. So
what do you think now? Kind of, you've been through several tech cycles here in this industry. What's the next cycle for us here, right? Next kind of 2-3 years with dealership technology. I have to imagine that you're pretty embedded into these product meetings. What can you share with us, right? Like, where are we heading? And as a dealer, like, what should I expect? What's going to change?
I think you're going to see a lot more with AI, obviously. Gen AI is big right now. We're working a lot on Gen AI. Salespeople are using it to write templates better, email responses better. There's a reference. God, they help me so much with reference letters. Don't tell anybody, but they do. It's ChatGPT. And so I feel like that's going to be an even bigger thing. What I think you're going to see is a more of a palette for it from the dealers, right? Because I think historically, most of the dealerships, and I don't want to stereotype here, but there's a lot of them that I call dinosaurs. They just laggard behind. They don't want to evolve. And I just went through this. I was in the market for a Raptor for 9 months, calling around to Ford stores all across the country, putting my sales, game on the line and trying to find a car. And I will tell you that the old come on down and just bring your trade is alive and well. And that's firsthand data as I was trying to buy a truck for a very long time. And so I had just went through that I finally got one, but I just went through that whole process. And I would tell you some stores, uber progressive. Some stores, they, didn't like the price of the truck. They call me back later when they dropped it. Some stores I entered in stuff, never heard back from them again. Some stores I connected with, never followed back up with any kind of thing with another run at me. Because it's just, I always tell my salespeople, it's not a no. This is a no right now. That's sales, man. And so I felt great experiences and really bad ones. And so that just echoed to me, there's going to be more laggards. I think a lot of these dealers are on gross highs because of the demand and supply issue that we've had. And I think they're going to be slow to relinquish that. They were dropping 4 or 5 pounders on everybody. And I remember every webinar I did before COVID, it was about margin compression on new cars. And I think there's going to be a little bit of a wrestle there with how much they want to relinquish the gross. But eventually, the supply's back. So the competition's back. And they're going to have to, drop that price to stay competitive, I think, in the long game. All the webinars I did were about margin compression, right?
Volume's definitely taking a hit now. And I spoke with some other large dealers with, lots of rooftops. And the sentiment's changing a little bit. It wasn't as positive as it was 6 months ago. So, we'll see how that plays out. The industry is resilient, as we know, but you can't mess with Mother Nature and just market forces. So, TBD. But it's definitely changing a lot. Before we wrap up, if anyone would like to get in touch with you or learn just more about your solutions, what you do, we will throw a couple links in the show notes below. But if they'd like to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Probably through email. And that'd just be my chase.abbott@coxautoinc.com. And they can email me there and I'll make sure I follow up. The sales person in me will not let anyone go unfollowed up with. So I'll make sure I get back to everybody. But I appreciate that opportunity.
We'll add that in the show notes as well. Chase, any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I would say thank you to folks like you that are trying to give a kind of non-biased third-party view of what's going on in the industry. There's a lot of hard sales pitching out there and, we do this and they don't. I think dealers are just getting called every day by every vendor trying to sell their stack. One more car is all you got to sell. And so I think
or worse, coming in and knocking on your office door.
Yeah, without an appointment. Yeah, right. And I get it, going hard in the paint, but we got to be a little bit more tactful. That's why I tell my team, we're not selling aluminum siding here, okay? We don't have 8 billion customers. We have 18,000, okay? We got to be much more tactful on how we show up. These guys are getting called every day, and I know that because I used to get called every day. Like, how are you going to stand out as a lot of the stuff I talk about with my sales team?
Well, when we were growing and we were still in a very, very small facility, there was no gatekeeping to office, right? Like it was such a small facility to the extent that like literally anyone could walk in at that time. And so, people just knocking on, it's like, come on, I'm doing something, like, please don't. That changed over time. Chase Abbott, thanks for coming on the pod. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Please give the podcast a rating, consider subscribing to the show, and check the show notes for links to what we talked about. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.